Welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You knew that because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. And we are marching along on our drive to 500 subscribers. If you missed it, we're doing a big giveaway, a big jersey giveaway. Now, if you're one of the people who's been with me from day one, you're like, I don't want to have a Gmail account. I don't want a YouTube account. Maybe this will incentivize you to. As part of the drive to 500 subscribers, I'm going to randomly select a subscriber to this channel, the Russ Joy channel on YouTube. So if you're watching on Facebook, where we're streaming for the first time on the Russ Joy Show channel, if you're watching on X, if you're watching on any other platform, if you go over to YouTube, the description has the link to the YouTube account. Subscribe to the channel, and when I hit that 500 subscriber mark on YouTube, within 7 days, I will pull a random subscriber. That person will win a jersey of their choice up to $175. Why is it $175? Because apparently Flyers jerseys are really, really expensive. And I don't want to discriminate against a hockey fan if they end up winning. But you can go out and you can pick a Kelly Green Eagles jersey. You could pick a Sixers jersey. Maybe you want to get a Tyrese Maxey. Maybe you want to load up on Paul George. Perhaps you're very excited about Red October and you've decided that, you know what? I would like to go out and get a Nick Castellanos jersey, s'il vous plaît. By all means, friends, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And again, hit that 500 subscriber mark. Within 7 days, I'll pull a randomly selected subscriber. You win a jersey of your choice. We'll link up. We'll figure it out. And I'll get that sent out your way. So something fun. And it's my way to thank you. Because I don't have many ways to thank you as a listener or a subscriber to the show. This is how I'll do it. So we are going to, at some point here, get into the comments in a little bit. But obviously, a lot of things are going on. And the biggest story in town isn't the Philadelphia Eagles, who 5 days after getting embarrassed in Tampa Bay have not fired their head coach. We all knew this was going to happen. We knew that Nick Sirianni was going to stay in power. He remains. Buckle up, Buttercup. Let's hope week 6 goes better. But no, I have good news for you. And it's not just the jersey giveaway. And it's not just what I'm going to throw across the bottom here, which is a shameless plug for your Red October merch. If you go over to shop.therussjoyshow.com and go check out some of those fantastic designs, all kinds of Red October stuff. We also have the I Don't Give a Cruck shirt. That one's been selling really well. The one with the little ghost on it, that one's been selling really well. Red October, all kinds of fun stuff. Head on over there. That link is also in the description of the episode. No, the real good news today is that the Eagles can't hurt you this weekend. They don't play. Let's take this week to do all the fun things that really do matter in life. This is the weekend where if you're a husband who actively avoids doing anything that your wife wants to do with the kids, this is the weekend that you have to sacrifice. This is the one where if she wants to go to Lynn Villa to go pick apples, you go to Lynn Villa to pick apples. If she wants to go over to Highland Orchards to go have some apple cider donuts, you go do that. If she wants to go up to like Boyertown area to Freecon Farms and let the kids like climb on the hay bales and do all kinds of stuff, by all means, this is the weekend to do it. I know for one, I enjoy that kind of stuff, but I am kind of looking forward to like doing some family stuff this week. I'm also looking forward to actually getting to sit down and watch Red Zone and use Sunday Ticket and have the 4 games at once going on my TV. I'm looking forward to that and not having to worry about watching the Eagles disappoint me this weekend. So that's all good news. We also got some very interesting news yesterday. Well, I'll tell you this. I have to be very careful in how I do this. We had a sit down, not for this show, but for Snow the Goalie. If you're a Flyers fan, I promise you that next week there's going to be an interview that's going to drop, an episode, a very special episode that's going to drop. And there's a lot of very good nuggets in that. Now, the Flyers are going to make some roster decisions here over the next couple of days, which will probably render a little bit of the conversation not moot, but it'll give you a little bit of insight into why a certain player might not have made it or why a certain player might get a short look, but eventually will get sent down. But I can promise you that there's a lot of good stuff in it, but I am going to throw it over to this image because it's an ultimate, it's a who's who of the Flyers brain trust, which we got into. We were over down at Wells Fargo Center yesterday, and here it is. Da-da-da-da. Danny Briere, Keith Jones, Dan Hilferty sat down with Bundy, Ant, and myself. So next week, this is going to be an episode you won't want to miss. A lot of really good insight. And we also talked about The Sixers building their new arena, or at least getting the blessing from Mayor Parker. What Dan Hilferty's thoughts on that, what Comcast's thoughts on that are. We'll get into that. They talked a lot about Jet Lashenko. We talked a lot about Matvei Mishkov. And I will tell you right now that I got an answer out of Danny Briere about Alexei Kolosov that I think might change the perspective around the player and everything that happened this past offseason. That is kind of a tease, but I will tell you that it's worth checking out. Now, as you can see here, I've got the two cameras going. Why do I have two cameras going? Because we're going to experiment today with this one when we go out to the comments, because I always come over here to read the comments, but then I'm always looking off to the side. So we're going to go to the comments really quick before we dive into the real big story today, which, of course, is Phillies-Mets. Let's go over to the comments really quick. BH says, Billy B visiting Philly. Bye-bye, Nikki. Ooh. Nico says, what up? Reed DeFord. Wow. Morning and F the Mets. Phil's in 4. Connor Allen says, I am here. JH celebrates. Also notes that hockey jerseys are so expensive. My wallet cries constantly. Yes. Reed DeFord says, we got playoff baseball. Think again. I don't know what this, but think about, the honeydew BS. Yes. Well, there is baseball this weekend, but I don't know if you'd noticed. The games are pretty long. You're still going to have to go out and, Reed, I'm sorry. You're going to have to go pick some apples this weekend. It's just, I don't make the rules. Somebody does. I don't make those rules. JH says, calling out all of the best fall things to do in PA. 100%. We have a bunch of different apple orchards we like to go to as a family. It's just our thing. And again, I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. Sean C says, the Astros had the bye in 2022 and 2023. They nearly ran the table in 2022 and got to Game 7 of the ALCS last year. The bye is an excuse reserved for those in Atlanta. The Phillies are top to bottom the better team, but I have little confidence they'll play to their potential. They need to convince me they won't go ice cold to end their season for the third straight year. We're going to get to that in a second. JH says, tell us about sexy Alexei. Alexei Kolosov. I think that there's a reason that hasn't been made public to this point on why Kolosov didn't come over in the first place. And I think it actually kind of lends a little bit of credence to what I've been saying this whole time. But you get to find out next week on Snow the Goalie. I think that we're actually supposed to record a Snow the Goalie today. It won't have that interview. The Flyers team filmed that, and they're doing all the audio editing on it. There's a guy who likes to constantly say that we're doing propaganda for the Flyers when we do these sit downs. I actually thought about having a little TV on in the background just to show that there are no cuts in the footage. We talk about these things with them ahead of time. It's in our contract. They can't really do that. So the troll can be a troll, but that kind of is what it is. Connor Allen says, Craig can't handle 2 cameras on crossing broadcast. That's right. Because if he did, he'd have to do this. He'd have to go from here to over here. And then I can't find, there we go. I think there's a way to do it. I have another little board. We'll figure it out here in a little bit. But anyway, Landros 2 talking about the Phillies says bats need to lead the way. Tyler DeMuro, I don't remember this name being on here, but thank you for joining, Tyler. Make sure you hit that subscribe. Says somehow Winker will be more annoying than Nemo sprinting at a walk or on a walk. Yeah, the spiking of the helmet last night. He's like the Temu.com version of Bryce Harper. He's really trying to cosplay as Harper. It's actually kind of funny in a way. Slightly endearing, I guess, if you're a Mets fan. Certainly not if you're a Phillies fan. Jay Peterman over on X says, need to have the bats going early to make the air stay in the building, which I want to get to here in a second. Sean C says, can you tease us a bit? Will Kolosov still be here around the holidays? I can't tell you that. That's the one thing. I get the feeling that Kolosov's going to stay. That's my thought. I think that he's going to end up staying in North America. And I think that they've made it clear to him that the Fedotov contract shouldn't stand in the way of him thinking he has a chance. Make of that what you will. Jamie checks in over on YouTube and says, this is not a weekend for pumpkin patch or house hunting. We have MLB postseason, college football Saturday, and NFL. Put a dent in that couch. That might be a pretty good place for us to end over at the comments. And we'll get back into all of the hilarity for today. So there are things that are going on with the Phillies. We know how important Red October is. I found myself embroiled in a scandal. It's not really a scandal. I found myself embroiled in a Twitter controversy that really wasn't meant to be a controversy at all. And in fact, I would argue isn't even a controversial take. Now, I did notice, social media is social media. A lot of the people who like to get up in arms about things, like to name call, like to get themselves really worked up. A lot of those people tried to dunk on me in game 2 of the Mets and Brewers series because the Brewers came back. And then it was like, well, okay, looks like the Brewers are going to win the series. I even had Kyle Pagan, colleague from over at Crossing Broad, try to dunk on me with a quote tweet with the crying puppy with the Brewers cap. Big Bet Bob Wankel trying to quote tweet, trying to make me feel bad about the fact that I said the Mets are going to end up here. Mets win in Milwaukee in a game that they score 4 runs in the top of the 9th. Milwaukee doesn't really have much of a chance in the bottom half of the inning, and it's over. And now you have a divisional matchup in the divisional round in the NLDS. And I will tell you really quick that I don't love the matchup for the Phillies, and it's not because the season series was close, and we'll get into some of the specifics here, but because there are reasons that divisional games, divisional series in the postseason scare me, okay? If you're scared, get a dog. I don't want a dog. I have 4 kids. I don't need a dog. You should at least have a little bit of respect for the Mets. You should. The Brewers are a better team than the Mets, top to bottom. The Mets went into Milwaukee and won 2 of 3. And they did so in pretty damn impressive fashion in game 3 when they go and they put up 4 in the top of the 9th. Like, that game looked effectively over, hence all the trolling. They didn't give up. This Mets team, for whatever reason, just doesn't know how to say die. That's a concern. I always look at postseason series when you're playing against a division opponent as being the ultimate leveling of talent disparity. So what do I mean by that? I mean that when you have to play as many series as these teams do against teams within their own division, you start to learn the intricacies and the nuances of those teams because you've played against them so many times. For years, we have watched the Phillies take on a below average Marlins team, which still somehow gives the Phillies fits. We have watched the Phillies in some years go up against a average at best Nationals team and get taken behind the woodshed. We've also watched the Phillies go and do the same thing in years where the Braves are heavily favored, and they have taken down the Braves. They took down the Braves in the postseason at a time where I think the Braves were actually the better team. And I'm not saying that the Mets are a better team top to bottom. They're not. The Phillies are a better team. The Phillies are a team for much of the season that we regarded as being the best team in the National League and probably the best team in baseball. So I want to be really clear that before we get into this little controversy that, like, I ultimately think that the Phillies can win this series. And if they do, I think the Phillies can end up going to the World Series. There are obviously a bunch of factors, which we will also get into, that could, hamper that, could derail those efforts. But I do want to just point out, when you play against a team that you've played as many games against this season as they have against the Mets, it makes me sit back and say, this isn't a sure thing. Being the better team on paper doesn't mean you are a shoo-in to win the series. Now, the Phillies do have home field advantage. They do. They don't have it throughout the postseason because they got complacent down the stretch, going 4-6 in their last 10 when the Dodgers went 8-2. Some people like to make the argument that maybe the Phillies were trying to avoid a potential matchup with the Padres. Maybe the Phillies wanted to get themselves a better matchup in the NLCS. And if you want to go that route, if that's the thought that you have, by all means, you can have it. My issue with that, of course, is I want you to go out and get the best record, have home field advantage, have it throughout the entire postseason. And it's pretty simple. Now, if the Dodgers go and get knocked out in the NLDS, all of a sudden the Phillies will have home field advantage throughout the rest of the postseason because they have the second best record in baseball. But this Mets team doesn't scare me from a player-by-player perspective. The Phillies rotation, even with some potential issues, is still a better rotation than the Mets. The Phillies lineup, this big money lineup, which from top to bottom is as good as or better than any other lineup in Major League Baseball, is better than the Mets lineup. But the Mets know what makes you tick. And there's a bigger issue, and it does have to do with home field advantage, and that's where I'm going to throw to the controversy, and then we'll get back into some of the ins and outs of the series and what I expect to have happen. So we'll just go over there really quick. So I tweeted a couple days ago something about the Mets. And this is, I think this was after game one, or maybe it was after game one. It was after the Mets were very clearly in position to potentially win that series against the Brewers. Let's just go over here really quick, because I'm all about transparency here with all of you, because I value all of you. Let's go over here. So how do I get, there we go. I'm going to take this one off. So I tweeted a couple days ago, getting the Mets is just awful for the Phillies. Their fans will negate home field advantage. They've got the confidence of winning 3 of 4 to cost the Phillies home field throughout the postseason. That's all without mentioning how soft and complacent the Phillies have been. Now that might hurt. And if you hear that and you have a visceral reaction to it, by all means jump in the comments and we can have that conversation. When I say soft and complacent, I've had some people who have DM'd me, and I've had a couple of other people who texted me, Big Bet Bob, one of them, who says, what does soft mean exactly? Soft to me is being the team that is good vibes only. Soft is the idea that this team didn't want to upset the apple cart in the offseason and make a couple of bigger moves because they were worried about the locker room dynamic. I think that it's totally fine if you like the people that you work with. I think it's actually better. Garrett Stubbs is a wonderful human being by all accounts. Is he backup catcher quality on a World Series contending team? I'm not sure, but he's the guy because they cared about the vibes. What is soft? What is complacent? After the London series, Phillies struggled. After the All-Star break, the Phillies struggled. They did look complacent. There were stretches where the Phillies got out to such a big lead within their own division and were so far ahead of the rest of Major League Baseball that they kind of rested on their laurels. They didn't look like a team that was busting it each and every game. It didn't look like a team that was going to go on to challenge the Mariners' record or to even break 100 games, 100 wins. That doesn't mean that the Phillies are bad. It doesn't mean that I think they have a rotten locker room. It's actually on the contrary. I think that it's a bunch of guys who really do genuinely like each other and are going to ultimately want to play hard for one another. But the team has shown bouts of complacency, whether it is after the All-Star break, whether it was down the stretch. Again, you could make the argument that maybe the Phillies knew that they wanted to avoid a Padres matchup, and so getting the second seed is better for them than getting the first overall seed. Again, I like winners. I like teams that aren't afraid of a potential matchup and go after the best record in baseball. That's what I want to see. I've seen times this season where Bryce Harper hasn't run out a play to first base where he would have been safe and had to go up and apologize to Rob Thompson. There have been moments. I mean, if you could say somebody was going through a little bit of a slump in the past, like a Trey Turner went through a slump last year that led to the standing ovation that for some reason there's going to be a documentary about. Does that make a guy soft? No, not necessarily. Does it make me wonder about like if he's got the killer instinct in October? It does. Do I think that the Phillies have gotten complacent in the past and maybe in their own heads considered soft? I don't know. Maybe soft in some ways isn't exactly the best way to put it. But like, we have to be fair here. The Phillies bats went cold in the World Series 2 years ago. The Phillies bats went cold against the Diamondbacks a year ago against a team that I think we would all say the Phillies were better than. We thought they were better than Arizona, but the bats went cold. And the weird thing about this Phillies team is when one guy loses it, it's like the Monstars have come down, made them touch a baseball, and they all lose their powers all at once. I do have legitimate concerns about the lineup. And I have concerns about some of the issues or potential issues that could rear their ugly heads with the rotation. But, all right, so there were some people who got upset about the words soft and about complacent. Now, if complacency is the point you want to argue, I do think that you and I are living in totally different places. Now, there was one guy on Twitter who decided to get a little bit nasty about it. We're not going to say, ridiculously so, but wasn't exactly kind about it. So this guy, Drew Dalton, who I think has been following me for years, says, dude, shut the fuck up. It's such a soft-ass position to take. Home field will not be lost, and stop being scared of the fucking Mets. It's embarrassing. Can we just have a moment here? Can we have a very brief moment, me and all of you? If you're going on Twitter and you see an opinion you don't agree with, and your first reaction is to tell somebody to shut the fuck up or tell them it's a soft thing or to stop being scared, I got to tell you, you got some problems. Like, you have to maybe just come down off the emotional high for a second. If you have that visceral of reaction to somebody saying that your favorite baseball team has been complacent at times, or noting the fact that, like, the Mets might not be a good matchup, if your first reaction is to just jump in like that, there are a lot more important things in the world. Now, if that's the most important thing in the world to you, the Philadelphia Phillies more than anything else in your life, maybe that's good. Maybe it's not. But that's fine. So I go back to this because I said to the guy, your response is embarrassing. Friendly wager on Mets fans being 45% or more of the crowd. Now, did I tweet that as a main tweet for engagement? No. Did I put it out there and not really think about what 45% of Citizens Bank Park looks like? Indeed, I did. Yeah, I wasn't exactly thinking, like, yeah, that's around 20,000 seats. I don't think that the Mets fans are going to end up with 20,000 seats. So on Monday, I went on Crossing Broadcast and I clarified my position on this because I listened to, I be fair and honest. And if I screw something up, I am not above saying I was wrong. So I'm going to throw to this from Monday where I clarified that 45% thing because a lot of people have been running with that. They've been responding to the original tweet, the 45%. So let's just go over here really quick. I'll let myself make the case from Monday. I listened to you and Bob talk about my 45% thing, which I do regret tweeting. I do.
Oh, okay.
Because, and I will tell you, Kevin, as you know, I like to be hyperbolic sometimes. I will say, this, I stand by this. This is like Inception, by the way. And I think that the screen and the Chuck Norris gift was fantastic. It was a great use of that. I think that no matter what percentage, and I actually do lean more to like 30% because Pagan pinged me in Slack about it. I think that 30% is totally in play for Mets fans to like show up to Citizens Bank Park,
which would be
because it's
15,000 people.
I think that's within play. Like, I don't think that that's ridiculous because it's secondary market. You guys were talking about the fact that like a lot of season ticket holders look to list their tickets. I had people last night go, oh, well, 500 people, like 500 tickets are available. What the fuck's he talking about? That's 500 at like the moment that you looked. It doesn't mean that there were only 500 tickets ever made available, right? And like the Mets haven't advanced yet. You're not going to buy tickets to Citizens Bank Park if you're a Mets fan before your team actually advances. Like, let's be real here. Like, come on. I think it's in play. I think around 30% is in play, but I think what'll happen is like, so there's a non-zero chance this happens. Play the scenario out with me. Zach Wheeler goes out, hopefully has a really dominant game one, which is what we all want to see. Game two, they send Aaron Nola out. Aaron Nola does the thing that he does where he looks locked in. Third inning comes, he gives up 2 home runs, maybe back-to-back. Solo shots, doesn't matter. That first home run, you are going to hear a Mets contingency that's going to be so loud, it is going to sound like 45% of the park is Mets fans. It will at points sound like a home game for the Mets. That's what I mean. So like, sure, butts and seats, 45% was hyperbolic. I think 30 is actually in play. I don't think it's as crazy as people might think it sounds. And I think ultimately when you listen on TV, you listen on the radio, if that were to come to fruition and if the Mets were to take a lead, it would very much sound like a Mets home game. That's where I'm at. And I could be wrong. I don't think I am, though.
Well, the Mets
I'm mad enough to stand next to it and say, like, hey, 45% hyperbolic, not a great number to throw out. But that, it wasn't in the first tweet. It was after the guy called me, what was it, like a fuckwit or something? So there you go. Now, again, what's the difference between me and some of the people who are on the radio? Radio people don't admit when they're wrong. I'll bring the receipts. I'll show you exactly what I said. You can judge it from there. Now, what exactly does 30% of Citizens Bank Park look like? If we base it on the idea of 47,000 people in attendance, that's about 14,000 tickets. Now, if you're sitting down saying to yourself, how the hell are they going to get 14,000 tickets? That also seems hyperbolic. Again, you may be right. Here's the problem. The secondary ticket market is potentially a problem for the Phillies. Now, at any given time, you can go and you can take a gander, and I'm not going to bring it up here because SeatGeek and those people, none of them sponsor the show, and that's fine. That's fine. But at any given time, you can maybe find 500 to 600 tickets on the secondary market on one site. That doesn't mean that they're listed on all of the sites. There is a discrepancy in inventory between a SeatGeek or a StubHub or a Ticketmaster or wherever. Just because you see 500 at one point does not mean there were only ever 500 available. If you don't think that there were some Mets fans who automatically, after that game 1 win against the Brewers, went on to one of the secondary market sites and bought a ticket to Citizens Bank Park, like I would bet you they did. Do I think that Mets fans then ran out to do the same thing after losing game 2 against the Brewers? No, because if you're a Mets fan, why do you want to have tickets to a Phillies playoff game if your team's not going to play? It's not just the secondary market. It's also ticket brokers. And it's like the one thing that I don't think a lot of people are just aware of. Ticket brokers control thousands of tickets. Now, I know that it's different from arena and stadium to arena and stadium. But like if we just look at this on a smaller level, people like to point back to the example of last year when the Sixers played the Knicks in the postseason. Oh, well, it was totally different, Russ. You know, the Knicks were a team that New York was really excited about. It was cheaper to come see the Knicks play in Philly than it is to watch them play at Madison Square Garden. Sixers fans were just kind of expecting the wheels to fall off. It's a big difference in belief. Red October is a totally different animal. And to you, I say, Red October is definitely a different animal. There's no denying that, okay? The fan bases and their level of enthusiasm between the Phillies now and the Sixers then, totally fair point. I'll also point back to when Rangers fans took over Wells Fargo Center against the Flyers a couple of years ago. Again, bad Flyers team, better Rangers team, cheaper to watch a game at Wells Fargo Center than at Madison Square Garden. We can look at that and say, okay, smaller scale, right? Wells Fargo Center doesn't hold nearly as many people. These weren't postseason games. They were regular season games. Part of what allowed for the takeovers of the Knicks and the Rangers games were ticket brokers, where ticket brokers can own not all of the seats in an entire section, but large swaths of tickets in multiple sections. Now, do I know for a fact that ticket brokers own 10,000 seats worth at Citizens Bank Park? No. Do I think they probably own or have access to 5,000 to 8,000 seats? Yeah, I do. So if I need to get to 14,000 and I can say ticket brokers might control about 8,000, I only need to get to 6,000 more to get to that 30% mark. I feel like I'm doing the Steiner math promo from his TNA days. But like if it's 8,000 controlled by brokers and 6,000 can float out there somewhere on the secondary market, I don't think that is giving you, I think that's going to get you close to that 30% mark. I don't think people understand. It's not just New Yorkers who are going to come down and support the Mets. There are New York fans who live among us. I have friends who are Mets fans. Why they're Mets fans, I don't know, but they are. And they live very close to Philly, and they're going to want to go see this game. Again, I don't think that the Phillies fan base is bad. I think people are really excited about Red October. But I was listening to Crossing Broadcast before I jumped on it on Thursday. I kept saying Monday. On Thursday, and I'm listening to Kincaid and to Bob talk about the fact that some season ticket holders may have been sent an email from Major League Baseball saying, hey, if you want to sell your tickets into the secondary market, you'll get a credit for next year. That's a possibility. I listened to them talk about the fact that some season ticket holders will sell their tickets for the postseason to pay for the regular season the next year, which on the surface you might think is a really stupid thing. Like, why have season tickets if you're not going to go to the playoffs, if you're not going to have first right of refusal for your seats? Like, why wouldn't you go for the postseason? Because for a lot of people, it's just kind of baked into their lives that, all right, there are 81 home games. I'd rather be able to go to 81 home games or 60 home games and pay for them by selling the postseason tickets. There's no real way for people to know who they're selling to either. Like the only way that you can do it, and we've seen some people trying to do it. I saw John Marks trying to do it to facilitate a couple of deals on Twitter yesterday. But like the only way to know that you're selling your tickets to a Phillies fan is to sell it directly to a Phillies fan. It's to connect with them on social media and to figure out that transfer. But if you put it on the secondary market, you can't just say, person must confirm they're a Phillies fan. They must upload a picture of themselves celebrating at the '08 World Series parade. You don't have a way to make sure that fans are who they say they are. You don't have a way to guarantee that your ticket that you sold to try to pay for next season's season tickets aren't going to end up going to a Mets fan. Now, again, I know it still might be hyperbolic. 30% might still be hyperbolic. I totally get it. I do. Seriously, I get it. And sometimes hyperbole is a world in which I live. But like, if you don't think that the Mets fans are going to have a strong contingent, you're out of your mind. And those Mets fans are going to show up belligerent, angry, loud. Their whole goal is going to be to take over the stadium. The same way that for a long time, Phillies fans would go down to Nationals Park and embarrass the Nationals by taking over that park for like a Roy Halladay start. We used to revel in that. You don't think Mets fans are going to try to do the same thing?
But Russ, I saw that the Mets haven't even sold out the games at Citi Field. So if they can't sell out the games at Citi Field, why would they pay the money to come down to Philadelphia where the tickets are cheap? Why would they come down to Philadelphia to fight the Phillies here?
Because there's no guarantee, if you're a Mets fan, that the series is going to mean as much when you get to game 3 or game 4. Like in theory, if you're a Mets fan, you want it to. Like you want to potentially be there for a clincher, right? For a game 4 clincher. Oh my God, they might do it. But like, there's something to be said for going into the enemy territory, screaming, being ridiculous, and cheering on your team and pissing off Philly fans in the process. That's part of a good rivalry. I saw that there's another company. I think it was Fans of Philly, or it was Philly Sports Trips. One of them, maybe both. They're trying to promote a thing where you get tickets to the Phillies-Mets game up at Citi Field, and they're like doing a bus trip. Good for them. But they say like ticket availability is very limited. Okay. I'm sure some Phillies fans are going to try to go take over Citi Field. Those tickets aren't going to be cheap either. And I think Phillies fans really just prefer to be at Citizens Bank Park. I don't know how well the fans are going to travel to New York, but I do expect Mets fans to travel. So this comes back to the original thing that somehow was, controversial. The Mets winning means that Mets fans are going to negate some of the home field advantage. And when I lay out this scenario, Zach Wheeler goes out and has a great first game. You have to hope that that happens, right? I like Zach Wheeler a lot. Believed since the day he signed here that he became the immediate ace. The Phillies were a little bit slow on the uptake, but it ended up proving to be true. Zach Wheeler as the guy to start game 1 puts you at such an advantage. And if you win that first game, everybody gets to take a good collective deep breath. But if something goes awry with the bullpen in game 1, those Mets fans are going to be loud. And if the Mets win game 1, you can bet your ass that that secondary market is going to be full of some Phillies fans who start to get the Negadelphian energy and they list their tickets. Those Mets fans are going to then be hungry to see their team take a 2-0 lead. And if you trot Aaron Nola out and he has one of those shitty innings that he's pretty well known for at this point, where he gives up back-to-back jacks even if they're solo homers, that place isn't going to sound like Red October. And I also hate to point this out, and this is the last, Negadelphian thing. I don't know if all of these people who got upset realize, but like we, and I'll put myself in here, we as a collective fan base are fickle people. Okay? This fan base is not perfect. This fan base acts very tough when things are going well and then whines a lot when things don't go well. Philly fans like being treated as the top fan base in baseball, in football, in basketball, in hockey. When that gets called into question, all of a sudden everybody hates us. Well, it's okay. We don't care if everybody hates us, but you do. And when this kind of thing happens, and if this unfortunate scenario plays out where the Phillies do fall behind, that place is going to be quiet, and you all know it. You know for a fact that if game 2 rolls around and Aaron Nola gives up 3 runs in the first inning, Citizens Bank Park is going to sound like a morgue. You all know it. Now you could sit back and say, well, Russ, I'm going to go to the game and I'm going to cheer, and good for you. And you're one of the best fans. But we have all been to a game for one of these Philly teams where they are favored to win. The game goes sideways and the place is fucking quiet. And the worst part about it is the other side isn't going to be quiet. Brewers fans come in. If they had won that series, Brewers fans aren't going to travel well. There are going to be some Brewers fans. You're going to hear them cheer when their team does something well. If Philly fans go quiet, if the team falls behind, and that raucous Mets contingent, whether it's 10%, 20%, 30%. They're going to make it sound like Citi Field South. I saw that in the comments, so I'm going to steal it. Now, again, I want the Phillies to win. I want the Phillies to go on a deep run. Nothing makes me happier than watching the Philly teams go on and compete for a World Series, for a Stanley Cup, for a Super Bowl, for the Larry O'Brien Trophy, for MLS Cup. Still wounded by Gareth Bale. Far post. Lost on a late run. That's fine. I want the Phillies to win. I think we all do. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that this fan base can be fickle from time to time. And that the worst case scenario for the Phillies was that they would play the Mets, not because of the on-field product, but because of everything around it. Ultimately, I still think the Phillies can and probably will win the series, but I don't think it's going to be a sweep. Will this series go the distance? It might. And if it does, it probably does still favor the Phillies. They would still have home field in the final game. They would still get multiple starts out of a Zach Wheeler. I still think that the Phillies bullpen, even though it's had some moments, is a better bullpen. And ultimately, you're paying this lineup a lot of money to perform. A long series, maybe you can make the argument it favors the Mets because it proves that they're able to stay on level pegging with the Phillies and that by that point they're going to really have the belief. I'm not sure. I'm not going to get crazy here. I think that we're okay. I'm going to go over to the comments. Comments time! All right, let's see what people are saying out there on the YouTube, X, and the Facebook. Yuki Matsui, I don't remember that name being here. Yuki, thanks for checking in. Make sure you hit that subscribe. Says the Phillies has been a 500 team since the London series. Phillies took a long break, might be rusty. Christopher Sanchez just had a baby. He might be exhausted. That's a fair point. Babies tire you out. Any of you who are out there who have kids, you might not remember having the baby or being in the room when the baby was birthed. But everything's kind of a blur. I don't really remember anything about the first few weeks after any of my 4 kids were born. You're sleep deprived. You're exhausted. You're emotionally drained. You're trying to be supportive of your spouse or your significant other who's going through all kinds of physical things that men are not tough enough to go through. I will stand resolute in the belief that if men were responsible for birthing children, we'd stop existing as a species. We would. Kudos to all the moms out there. That's very woke of you to say, Russ. Shut up. It's true. No, stop. All right. Jay Peterman says the Phillies hype video needs to drop. I wonder, will that happen? I don't think it's happened yet. It could happen in the next hour or two, though. And if it does, we'll bring it here. We're going to do a 6-hour show today. We're just going to wait for the Phillies hype video to drop. We're not doing that. Sean C. says the Phillies have given Zach Wheeler near zero run support past post All-Star break. It's a concern. I was actually talking, it was last night, talking to Anthony Sanfilippo about this, the 2011 team, and about, I hate bringing back prior trauma for everybody, but the Cardinals series, remember Doc Halladay goes out, he gives up 1 run, complete game, and the Phillies get shut out by Chris Carpenter, who pitches a complete game shutout. And you sit back and you look at that Phillies team and you say, this lineup had no excuse for getting shut out. And Halladay deserved more than 1 run of run support. Could be a concern. I think that the Phillies are going to start strong in game 1, in fairness. The rust thing that Yuki brought up, I think, is fair to some extent. They did have the moment where they were betting on the intra-league or the intra-squad game. I think it was it Stubbs or was it Bohm? One of them put something on Instagram about it. Said this one's for Pete, in honor of Pete Rose, because the thought had been put out there that they're going to be betting on their own game. It's kind of funny. Landros 2 says, just think of the rivalry they're building with the Mets, like a real one where both teams are good. Bring on the Mets. I know this is crazy. I know that some people view this as sacrilege, but I think that's actually a good way to look at it. I like the idea of building rivalries. I don't like the fact that the Sixers lost in the postseason to the Knicks, But I love the idea of a Sixers-Knicks rivalry for the next 6 years. I love it. It's far more interesting to me than like a Sixers-Wizards rivalry. I'd much rather the Mets be good and have like a Phillies-Mets rivalry than a Phillies-Nationals rivalry or a Phillies-Marlins rivalry. There's something about Philly versus New York that's just so exciting as a sports fan. I'm happy. Listen, I don't like the Rangers, but Flyers-Rangers is something I get excited for. Flyers-Capitals, not so much. Flyers-Bruins, I just don't like Boston teams. Chris Talbot says, because they didn't upgrade the backup catcher who won't play at all in the playoffs, they're soft. Question mark. This goes back to the soft thing. Like I said, soft might not have been the best word. Complacent is definitely fair. I do kind of come back to like the vibes better be immaculate. That playlist better be on point. Like if JT Realmuto gets hurt, like, yeah, then you really do have a significant problem at catcher. But then again, if you lose any of your big star players in the postseason, you're probably in trouble in some way. Jim Cochran, I don't remember this name being here. Hello, Jim. Hit that subscribe. Says all the top teams failed to pull away and win the number 1 seed. The Phillies aren't alone in that. The counter argument to that is that the Dodgers went 8-2 down the stretch to grab first place by the cojones. Now, the Guardians kind of fell apart. The Yankees, I think, played 500 baseball to end the season. The Phillies, I think, were 4-6. So on most accounts, agreed. But I will point out the fact that the Phillies were so far ahead for so much of the season that, like, I wouldn't call it a collapse that prevented them from getting the number 1 seed across all of baseball. But I think that they had a chance to, like, actually go out and get it. And they came up short. Tyler DeMuro on YouTube says, no one believed in the Sixers versus Knicks, which led to Wells Fargo Center takeover. Phillies fans believe in this team and aren't going to let Mets fans take over. We'll see. I would love to be wrong. I would love nothing more than to see Red October on Saturday, and it's just incredible, and you see no Mets fans, but I don't think that's realistic. JH says, Russ believes Citizens Bank Park will be renamed Citi Field South. This is who I stole it from. The conspiracy goes all the way to the top. Sean C. thinks that there's going to be a pocket of Mets fans as it goes every postseason game. Upwards of 8,000 to 10,000 seems way too high. We will see. Sean C. also says Sanchez in Citi Field should be marked as an automatic L. His home road splits are nuts. He should get game 2. That would be an interesting thing to see because he's right. Christopher Sanchez's numbers at home versus away are massively different. I just don't know if it throws things off with Nola, and I don't know if it sends Nola the wrong message to say, hey, fella, you've been number 2 all year, but we're afraid of our number 3, number 4 starters, home road splits. Let's give him game 2 and push you back. There is, by the way, there's one other thing that we have to get to, and there's a pitcher that we haven't talked about who I do have a concern about. Connor says, the logic of buying season tickets and selling weekend playoff tickets, the best part of the obnoxiously long season, just baffles me. JH said about the friends who are Mets fans, not all disabilities are visible. It's important to support and love them. Yuki is a Brewers fan and got 10 tickets to sell. Yuki, I'm sure there are going to be a bunch of Phillies fans who are going to watch the show, listen to the show. If you want to drop your, like Twitter handle or something in the comments and have somebody reach out to you to buy the tickets directly from you, you could do everyone a solid. Now, Yuki, I do have a question, though. If you're a Brewers fan, how the hell did you find the show? Let me know in the comments. I'm actually very interested now. Was Yuki just like looking for somebody to kind of break down? Like, Yuki, I'm sorry. I actually did want to see the Phillies play the Brewers. I thought the Brewers played a solid enough series, and I don't dislike the Brewers. I have no problem with them. I think they were actually a better matchup for the Phillies, but I digress. Connor says, selling my playoff tickets so I can watch Phillies versus White Sox for free in May. Frauds. JH says, I prefer watching Aaron Nola on Hers ads versus on the mound. It's the one unfortunate thing for me is, where I grew up, Pottsville, homie Yingling beer. Yingling had never had like an athlete endorsement before. And theirs was Aaron Nola. And that's like the season where he kind of fell off, where he went from being like Cy Young all the time, Aaron Nola, to being, the Rav 4th inning came up and it's all over. Joe Papel making excuses for everybody. All fan bases are fickle. You're right to some extent, Joe. I just think Phillies is a little bit exaggerated. but like not in a fake way. It just gets very quiet when things go sideways. Connor asks, was the hype video actually the Kruk video last week? That would be unfortunate if that were the hype video, because even though it was a good piece of content, people want to see a hype video right before the playoffs. Let's see. Jamie checks in and says, I'll be in attendance on Saturday so I can let you know on Tuesday how it is. That's what I want. Jamie, bless your heart. You let us know. You can always shoot a tweet over at the Russ Joy Show on Twitter, and we'll put it out there, and we'll show everybody what it looks like. I am going to be really interested. Listen, like I said before, I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong. And if it turns out that I'm wrong, and if it turns out that Saturday, it's like 95% Phillies fans, and there are just a couple sprinkles of that bluish purple and orange throughout the crowd, I'll be thrilled, okay? I will take back all of the negative, quote-unquote, negative things that I said. I just think that Mets fans are going to travel well. And that doesn't mean that I'm actively rooting against the Phillies, which some other people accuse me of on Twitter. I'm not rooting against them. I don't want the Phillies to fall apart. I want the Phillies to win. But we have to acknowledge that, like, there is a certain reality that some people just, for whatever reason, are unwilling to accept. But that's okay. All right, I think that was it on the Phillies. Oh, no, there was one other thing. Ranger Suarez. If you have one concern, or if you said to me, hey, Russ, like what's the one thing that is the ultimate variable in this series? What is the thing that could ultimately put the Phillies through to the NLCS or end their series early, end their postseason early? What would it be? I would say it's Ranger Suarez. We have no idea what to expect from him. Now, I'm going to go over here and I'll pull up some of the stats from his last, let's say his last 10 games or so. Because the concern that I have for Suarez isn't that he's a bad pitcher, because he's not. It's just a little bit more of a concern that, there has very clearly been something bothering him for about half the season. Remember, he went on the IL, or they kind of shut him down around the All-Star game. And there were a lot of questions about whether or not they should have shut him down for longer to get him fully healthy. And he seemed to be kind of fighting through something. Well, let's go back to his last 5 games for the Phillies. We'll go back to September 5th. He went 5 innings, no earned runs, great start. The next start was home against Tampa Bay, 5 1/3 innings, 4 earned runs, but he allowed 12 hits in that game, which was uncharacteristic of Suarez. He followed that up with 5 innings, 3 earned runs at Milwaukee. He followed that up in New York, if you want to have a concern, 5 innings, 2 earned runs. Not bad, but it's still only 5 innings. And then against Washington, he pitched 2 innings, gave up 6 runs, 7 hits. Not his best performance. Ranger Suarez has been an absolute stud in the postseason for the Phillies. Historically, he's been fantastic. There is a reason that in the past people have had the conversation about, should he be your real number 2 behind Zach Wheeler in the playoffs? Because he's been so good. But I do think that there is a concern. I think there's an injury concern. And to me, that's an actual problem. Now, if we go back to last year, where are we at? Last postseason. I can't find the numbers. It doesn't matter. He's been very good for them in the playoffs. That kind of goes without saying. He had a 1.04 ERA. There's 1.04 ERA in the DL and the DS last year, and then a 2.7 ERA in the NLCS a season ago. Each playoff series that he's factored into, he's had an ERA of 2.7 or less. And that goes all the way, it goes back to 2022. So when it comes to postseason performance, Ranger Suarez has had ice cold water, ice cold Kool-Aid coursing through his veins. I am still concerned about his health. And if ultimately he only gives you 4 or 5 innings in the playoffs and he's not on top of things as we expect him to be in the playoffs, it could cause a problem. We know Wheeler's going to be very good, although he's playing his old team. That can present its own issues. We think that Aaron Nola could have a good start, but we do also know that he's been inconsistent at times. We like Christopher Sanchez a lot. New baby is a totally different variable, but okay, I will allow for Christopher Sanchez to be very good. Ranger Suarez, if he's locked down Ranger Suarez, we're not even having a conversation about whether or not the Phillies can advance. Like, there is a scenario here. I don't think this will play out, but there's a scenario here where the Phillies can win this in 5 games, and it's because the starters are just fantastic. Like, there's a path here to the Phillies even going. I don't think a sweep is in play, but there's a case to be made that like a sweep could be in play just because of how good the starting rotation could perform. And that actually gets me to the last point of the day, which is when you look at the Phillies and Mets heads up, the Phillies won 7 games. The Mets have won 6 head-to-head this season. Here's your silver lining. 4 of the losses that the Phillies had against the Mets, 4 of the 6 wins that the Mets picked up against the Phillies, Taijuan Walker pitched in those games. Okay? Taijuan Walker is not going to pitch in this series. Taijuan Walker is not pitching. In theory, this series could be short. I have no idea how to handicap it. I have no real prediction for it. I do think that by the time we talk again on Tuesday, the Phillies are going to be in a strong position. And again, I will be happy to eat crow on Tuesday's show if the Mets fans make up little to no percentage of the attendance, and if things go sideways for the Phillies in any game, that it doesn't sound like Citi Field South. I'll happily eat crow. Now, is there a possibility here that on Tuesday we're looking at a really bad hole and that the Phillies have to kind of climb their way back into the series at Citi Field? Yes, that is very much in play. We have to acknowledge that there's a possibility. Why do I say that? It's not because I think the Mets are a particularly good team. It's not for all the other reasons I laid out. It's because anytime I talk about the Phillies on this show, things either go incredibly well or they go straight to shit. There has been no middle ground. Since starting this show, if I go into a series saying, it's going to be pretty tough, the Phillies go on a run. If I say, you know what, the Phillies have actually kind of pulled up the nose on this thing, I think the Phillies are actually in really good shape, they get their asses kicked. So I'm not putting a prediction out there. I'm not throwing it out into the universe. I think that by the time Tuesday's game rolls, or by the time Tuesday's show rolls around, we're going to be talking about a strong Phillies performance. Now, what do I want to look for aside from the rotation having a strong performance? We need to see if this lineup is ready to play and how much rust there is. We need to see if this team is going to be willing to manufacture runs. We need to see if the Phillies are willing to change their strategy. If they're not making solid enough contact swinging for the fences, we need to see if they're going to be able to change things up. Now, nothing will make anyone happier than if bottom of the first inning on Saturday, Kyle Schwarber comes up and cranks a leadoff homer. That, my friends, would absolutely get everyone hyped for Red October. We will see what happens. I think that Winker's going to end up being, as we talked about earlier in the show, is going to end up being the ultimate villain for the Mets. I fully expect there to be at least one benches clearing brawl or interaction at Citizens Bank Park. I would actually, if we could bet on that, I would put money on there being some very, very heated moments in this series. And there will definitely be fights in the stands, almost undoubtedly, or on the concourse. We all know this to be true. All right, I'm going to go back over to the comments really quick one more time before we head out. Dersh says the Phillies don't need a great 6 out of Suarez every time. We need a good 4, maybe 5 apiece. The only downside to that is you need to make sure that the rest of your starters are locked in, because you can't have a scenario where you say, all right, well, Nola only gave us 4. Sanchez gave us 5. Suarez gave us 4, because then you're putting a lot on your bullpen. And I think the less we have to see of this bullpen, at least early on, the better. Jim Cochran says, based on history, the bats are going cold should be a thing that concerns everyone, not Ranger. Again, I like to kind of lay out all the concerns. The bats are obviously a massive concern. They've been a concern the last few postseasons. Given the amount of talent that's in that lineup, given the variety of hitters, given the fact that it doesn't slant one side more than the other, like even when you go back to those great Phillies teams in the 08 to 11 run, so much of it came from the left side of the plate. given the fact that there's a nice balance on this team, I would like to think they're not slump proof, but maybe they'll be slump resistant this postseason. But we also have to be really, really fair. Joe Papel says Mets had the best record in baseball since starting out at 24-35. They're dangerous. Joe, you're right. This is why we're saying you can't count out the Mets. Here, we'll go to one non-Phillies point to end the show. Unless anybody has anything else, we can end this with like a little potpourri at the end of the show. If anybody has any other thoughts or questions or comments or concerns about the other teams in Philly, not just the Phillies themselves. We'll go to this, though. So JH says, do you think Jet gets the 9-game look? Jet Lashenko has, without a doubt, surprised the Phillies front office. Let's re-rack that. Jet Lashenko has absolutely shocked the Flyers front office, Flyers ownership, and the Flyers coaching staff. In fact, I would go so far as to say Jet Lashenko has surprised many of the Flyers players. I don't want to spoil everything about the big roundtable interview that'll drop next week, but there was a very interesting point made by Danny Briere about the physicality that Lashenko brings to the table and the strength that he brings to the table. And it harkens back to a very popular player who now serves as a high-ranking executive with another Eastern Conference team, the Bod. We'll talk about that when that interview comes out. But I think Lashenko is going to get the 9-game look. I don't think he'll stay here the entire season. I think that there is a real push by the coaching staff, by Tortorella especially, to give him that 9-game look and maybe consider keeping him here for the season. I just don't think ultimately the front office is going to decide that's the way to go, because you can't worry about winning games this year. It's about the 3 to 5 year plan. And ultimately sending Lashenko back down and letting him tear up juniors for a year is probably better for his overall development. Let's see. Connor says Jet is the 4th game starter. No, not happening. Not happening. JH says shit, with how bad the Flyers have been the past 10 years, they might as well play baseball. Oh, JH, the Jets taking off. I like that. Dersh says Torts has a man crush on the kid. He's very intrigued by him, but I'll tell you, the front office is very intrigued by Lashenko as well. Again, they were very, very, I can't wait for that interview to come out because they are very complimentary of him and a few of the other young guys on the team. All right, we're going to roll out. As I mentioned to you at the start of the show, the merch store is live. We've been doing a few sales a day, and we'll have, I always say full disclosure here. We didn't do $20,000 in sales here over the past week. We've been doing a nice amount of sales, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. And I think what I've started to see more of is that as people have been buying merch, they've been spreading the word about the shop, and then more orders have come in off of that, because you can see geographically where people's orders are coming in from. I'm going to throw it over here really quick. This is the store. This is the merch store, shop.therussjoyshow.com. If you use promo code JOY when you're checking out, you'll get free shipping on orders of $50 or more. So that would be like 2 t-shirts, or a t-shirt and a sweatshirt, or a t-shirt and a hoodie. We have the Ghost of Red October. That one's been selling really well. Schwarbomb, Red October, the postseason that says ring the bell. Don't give a cruck. Everything else, Red October. This ring the bell shirt has been really popular as well. But all of these designs are also available as long sleeve t-shirts. They're also available in hoodies and in crew neck sweatshirts. So if you haven't done so already, go give it a look. And remember, use promo code JOY when you put everything in your cart. You get free shipping on all orders of $50 or more. I will be honest with you. Okay. It's very simple. Oh, and by the way, the one that has the, the little ghost, this guy, we have this available as well. You have to go into the little sub menu or to the bottom where it says shop all products. But this design is available in a kids hoodie and kids t-shirt as well. One thing I will tell you is that has been the most popular design, but there could maybe be some more designs coming at some point in the not too distant future. So just throwing that out there. It's a lot of fun. Go get some Red October merch. Bank on the fact that the Phillies are going to have a nice Nice playoff run. And we'll end here with Tyler DeMuro's comment. Somebody get Utley on a plane from London ASAP. Wouldn't that be something? Maybe they should send Chase Utley up to Citi Field and have him sit in the box just to mess with the Mets. Anyway, thanks for checking in here on a Friday, a very Phillies-heavy edition of the Russ Joy Show. We'll be back on Tuesday where we will break down everything that we've seen in the Phillies-Mets series. We'll start to preview the Eagles' next game. We will talk about the Flyers. I think are going to be very close to starting the season. It's almost here. They played their last preseason game last night. They won against the Blue Jackets. We will talk about anything that develops in Sixers land. We'll maybe follow whether or not the Philadelphia Union make it into the play-in game to make the postseason in the MLS playoffs, and anything else that happens. There might be some other big stories in sports outside of just Philadelphia. By the way, if you know somebody who owns a local business, a business in the general Philadelphia area that would want to host an episode of this show, be featured, have a little sit down, I want to start doing that. I talked about that at the very beginning of the first episode of the show, but I'm thinking like, I would do an episode where we just stream live from a pizza place. We stream live from a coffee shop, talk to the owner of the business. We do the whole thing. It could be a lot of fun. You can always reach out. You can find me on Twitter at JoyOnBroad. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, and of course, the Russ Joy Show on YouTube. Remember, the Drive to 500 giveaway. Once we hit 500 subscribers on YouTube, within 7 days, I will randomly select a subscriber to the channel. That person gets to pick the jersey of their choice of up to $175. So it could be an Eagles jersey, Phillies jersey, Flyers, Sixers, Union. It could be a totally different one. If you want a Gretzky jersey for some reason, or if you're a Mets fan who's here to troll and you want to subscribe to the channel and then potentially win a Mets jersey, that is something that could happen. I wouldn't be happy about it, but if you subscribe to the channel, I'll still be grateful that you subscribed. Anyway, I'll be back on Tuesday. We can interact on Twitter between now and then. Keep an eye out for an episode of Snow the Goalie. Until Tuesday, I'm Russ Joy. This has been the Russ Joy Show. Everybody have a great weekend. Go Phillies. Talk to all of you very soon.